I was called an ungrateful snitch, so acted accordingly. This didn't begin with cheating. It started way earlier with fear. The kind of fear that grows up inside a house and learns to call itself normal. When people ask me what my father was like, I don't hesitate. Alcoholic, abusive, cruel. That's not anger talking, that's arsum. My sister and I never loved him. Love requires safety, and safety was never part of the deal. My sister was almost 10 years older than me. When she got accepted into a better high school in another city, she left and barely came back. I was 4 years old at the time. For a long time, I hated her for that. I thought she abandoned me. Now I understand she didn't abandon me, she escaped. There was only one exit, and she took it. Our town was built around one factory. One of those places where the factory is the city. Everyone worked there. Everyone depended on it. Everyone knew everyone else's business. Then the government bought it. New rules, new standards. Anyone without formal education was fired. My mother lost her job for months after giving birth to me. My father lost nothing. He got a pension, a military title, an honorary status. His payments nearly doubled. The only condition was that he had to behave like a proper officer. He didn't. My childhood was dramatic in a cinematic way. No music, no speeches. Just constant tension. Raised voices. Unpredictable moods. Hands that could turn violent. Words that cut deeper than fists. The worst part wasn't when he was drunk. Drunk men are loud and stupid. The worst part was when he was sober. Calm. Smiling. Precise. That's when he enjoyed it. For a long time, I thought something was wrong with me. That I was angry for no reason. That I was broken. Later I realized I wasn't broken. I was reacting normally to someone who enjoyed control. When I turned 18, I joined the army. Not out of patriotism. Not for honor. 2 reasons. A roof over my head and free food. And a third, more important one, I didn't have to go home. For me, the army wasn't hell. Home was hell. The army was an express highway out of it. A few years later, I was discharged for medical reasons. Mental health. Surprise. I won't romanticize it. I had anger issues, breakdowns, instability. I still work on it. I got compensation, insurance payments, and for the first time in my life, I had something close to silence in my head. I came back to my hometown briefly and realized one thing very clearly. If I stayed, I would either destroy myself or turn into him. So I left. I moved to the city where my sister lived. She had built a life, a career, stability. She gave me a couch, time, and something I hadn't had before, space. I found a job, started studying, decided to move into it. Not because it was trendy, but because it was one of the few fields where your last name and your family don't matter as much as your skills. I wasn't happy, but I was alive. That's when my father got sick. Cancer. Doctors said it wasn't fatal, but surgery was necessary. Treatment. Recovery. At that point, my sister had partially reconciled with him, mostly because our mother asked her to. My mother always asked for the sake of the family. She had been asking that for over 30 years. My sister paid for everything. Surgery, medication, hospital stays, recovery, all of it. At the same time, she was moving into a new house and buying her first car. In our country, that kind of medical treatment is brutally expensive. My father had money, a large pension, savings, status. He didn't pay a single dollar. He believed children are obligated. He believed being a father meant being owed. He didn't love his children, he loved ownership. The treatment worked. About a year later, doctors cleared him. He went back home with my mother. I stayed in the city, working, studying, barely holding myself together, relying on social programs for my own treatment. I visited him occasionally. No tears. No forgiveness. If he didn't bother me, I was satisfied. Then one day my mother called me crying and said, "He has another woman." Honestly, I wasn't shocked. I was annoyed. My mother has always been anxious, paranoid even, and part of me thought she was imagining things again. I didn't want to spend 4 hours traveling back home for what I assumed was another false alarm. I calmed her down and dropped the topic. A few months later, my sister called me instead. She had gone to visit our parents with her daughter. She planned to tell them she was 3 months pregnant. It was supposed to be a happy moment. It turned into a disaster. My father left his phone unattended. His mistress sent him an explicit photo. The notification popped up. My mother saw it. All hell broke loose. My sister later told me it was the first time in years she had heard our mother scream. Not cry, scream. When my father tried to hit her, my sister stepped between them. Then her husband did. She was 3 months pregnant. That's who my father was. The fight ended with hours of shouting, insults, and humiliation. The only good thing that came out of it was this. My mother managed to take his phone. It broke during the fight, but the memory was intact. Later, my mother asked me to throw it away. I didn't. Not out of foresight. Out of laziness. I brought it home and tossed it into a drawer. At the time, we tried to convince my mother to divorce him. She refused. Divorce, to her, was worse than public execution. She believed he might come to his senses. They had been together for nearly 35 years. So we stepped back. We cut him out of our lives. I set a hard rule. Only my mother, my sister, her husband, 3 close friends, and my girlfriend could call me. Everyone else was blocked. Especially my father's relatives. They immediately took his side. They blamed my mother for making a scene. They blamed us for exposing family business. They called us ungrateful snitches. And then came their favorite argument. He's still your father. I would have disappeared from all of them permanently if they hadn't made one mistake. They decided to use me. About 6 months later, they suddenly became very polite. Very kind. Inviting me to visit. Asking how I was doing. Pretending to care. People don't change overnight. Their motives do. I went alone, out of dark curiosity. That's when I found out they wanted to sell my father's house. The house stood on my grandmother's land. When my father had his first surgery, no one knew how it would end. At the time, we were still on speaking terms, so he transferred the house into my name for convenience. We convinced my grandmother, who was already over 80, to transfer the land to me as well. If this had happened a year later, they would be rather gouged out their own eyes. Now they needed my signature. I smiled, said I'd think about it, and left. On the way back, the plan started forming in my head. And for the first time in a long while, I felt something dangerously close to joy. That's where Act 1 ends. Because this is the moment when I stopped being the quiet child who survived him and became the adult who learned how to use the system he trusted so much. If you want Act 2 where the evidence comes out, the courts get involved, and power starts shifting, you already know what to do. I didn't confront him right away. That was the first real change. The old version of me would be exploded, shouted, accused, demanded answers that never mattered. This time, I waited. I went back to the city and didn't tell anyone what I was planning, not even my sister at first. I needed to be sure. Not emotionally sure, legally sure, structurally sure. I had spent my entire childhood living under his moods. I wasn't about to let one mistake give him control again. I took the phone out of the drawer. The screen was cracked. The body bent. Dead, at first glance. But the memory chip was intact. I took it to a small repair shop, the kind of place that doesn't ask questions if you don't ask them either. 2 days later, the technician looked at me and said, "You'll want to sit down." I didn't. I stood there and watched my childhood rearrange itself into files and folders. Messages, photos, voice notes, transfers. Not one affair. Not a moment of weakness. A second life. A parallel household. Financial support. Plans. Complaints about my mother. Jokes about how she'll never leave anyway. Comments about me. About my sister. About how children are useful when they're obedient. I didn't feel rage. That scared me more than rage. What I felt was clarity. I copied everything. 3 backups. Encrypted. Cloud. Physical drive. I learned that lesson early in life. Anything important will eventually be taken from you unless you protect it. That's when I told my sister. She didn't cry. She didn't yell. She just listened, quietly, like someone who already knew the ending but needed confirmation. Then she said one sentence that changed everything. "We need a lawyer. A real one." We found one through a friend, and not flashy, not emotional. The kind of man who listens more than he talks. He asked questions. Precise ones. Dates. Names. Money trails. Ownership. When we told him the house and the land were already in my name, he raised his eyebrows for the first time. "That changes things," he said. When we told him my parents were still legally married, he nodded. "That changes more." And when we showed him the evidence, and not everything, just enough, he closed the folder slowly and said, "If this goes to court, he won't be the one negotiating." That was the moment I knew this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about leverage. The lawyer explained the reality without sugarcoating it. Divorce courts don't care about morality unless morality leaves a paper trail. We had the paper trail. Infidelity before divorce. Financial misconduct. Emotional abuse supported by evidence. It wouldn't be fast. It wouldn't be clean. But it would work. There was only one variable we couldn't control. My mother. Convincing her took longer than preparing the case. She was terrified. Not of him, but of the idea of being alone. Of gossip. Of becoming that woman. Of breaking a marriage that had existed longer than I had been alive. 35 years of silence doesn't break easily. What finally changed her wasn't the evidence. It was one question my sister asked. "If your daughter were living this life, what would you tell her to do?" My mother didn't answer right away. But the next morning, she said she was ready. We filed quietly. No announcements. No warnings. I called my father a week later and told him I'd come home the following month to discuss the house situation. I kept my voice neutral, respectful. He was warm, almost charming. He thought the trap was closing around me. When I arrived, the entire family was waiting. Smiles. Tea. Fake concern. They talked about selling the house like it was already done. Like I was already cooperating. Then the lawyer walked in behind me. The shift was immediate. Faces hardened. Voices rose. My father exploded, first insults, accusations, the usual script. The relatives joined in, like a backup choir. Ungrateful. Disrespectful. You owe him. I let them talk. When they finally paused, I laid out the options. Option 1. He signs away any claims to the house and agrees to an uncontested divorce. Quiet. Clean. No court spectacle. Option 2. We proceed legally. Evidence submitted. Financial history reviewed. Public record. I didn't threaten him with prison. I didn't need to. He knew the laws. He had spent his whole life benefiting from them. He screamed. He threw things. He kicked us out. So he chose option 2. The first hearing was a joke. He didn't show up. Sent a statement instead, full of lies. The judge sighed like a man who had seen this story too many times. Suggested mediation. Suggested patience. Suggested we settle it privately. Our lawyer declined politely. Between hearings, my father switched tactics. He called every relative, every acquaintance, every old friend. He told them I was mentally unstable, that I had been discharged from the army for cowardice, that I was blackmailing him, that my sister was manipulating our mother. Some believed him. Most didn't. By the second hearing, he showed up, still confident, still loud, until the evidence appeared on the table. Not dramatized, not read aloud for effect, just submitted. Methodical. Dates aligned. Payments matched messages. Photos verified. Timelines established. I watched his posture change. This wasn't shame. It was the realization that he wasn't in control of the room anymore. The judge postponed the decision and scheduled further review. More time. More waiting. More pressure. Between hearings, my father tried reaching my mother directly. Apologies. Promises. Tears. Threats. All of it. We blocked his number. By the third hearing, he broke. He agreed to the terms. He signed away his claims to the house. He agreed to the divorce. The property rights transferred to my mother. I allowed him one thing: residency. He could live in the house for the rest of his life. Alone. No mistress. No relatives. No new family. A cage built from generosity looks a lot like mercy from the outside. That should have been the end. It wasn't. Because once the structure was in place, we started looking backward. At the money. My sister pulled out boxes. Old folders. Bank statements. Receipts. Hospital invoices. Medications. Surgeries. Recovery programs. Things she had paid for while he sat on savings and pensions. We calculated the total. I had to sit down. It wasn't about the number. It was about the pattern. He had let his daughter drain herself financially to save him and felt entitled to it. We filed a civil claim. Not dramatic. Not criminal. Ethical gray area, according to everyone around us. Children don't sue parents, they said. We did. The process dragged on for months. Hearings postponed. Judges advising compromise. My father missing appearances. Playing the victim. Pretending confusion. Eventually, the ruling came. Partial compensation approved. Enforcement followed. People came to the house. Not family. Not friends. Officials. Neutral. Efficient. Furniture was taken. Appliances. Electronics. Even the massage chair, a luxury he loved to brag about. Watching control leave a man who lived off control is educational. He paid most of it from his savings. 70% gone. Only then did I make the final move of this act. I contacted the institution that had granted him his honorary status. I didn't exaggerate. I didn't editorialize. I submitted documentation. They opened an investigation. Within weeks, his rank was revoked. His pension dropped by more than half. I learned about it the way everything in that town is learned, through rumors. Through my mother's voice on the phone, half laughing, half crying, telling me how everyone was talking. That was Act 2. The part where the system stopped protecting him and started answering to paperwork instead of fear. And that was only the beginning. Image https://dy7glz37j.glob.cloudfront.net/advice/images/better help/188/3C12501E163a CBCE man comforts woman during a therapy session L.jpg. Image https://ychef.files.bbci.co.uk/1280x720/po6v5s.l8.jpg. Imeg. https://compo.slate.com/images/1c3130288-009-41f3-8f09-40-1f3-8f09-3f6c7 to 1f7f.jpg. Crop equals 1540% to C 1040% to C x 0% to size 0. Image https://mediacldnry snbcnews.com/image/upload/t social share 1024x768 scale% to cf auto% to cq auto% 3 a best/stream/to a 1 to /December/ 121,203/1 C503612 GTDY11071 for mom yellow to P, JPG. Image https://cdnblog.findmykids.org/2ota/0 for/mad young mom and little daughter sit on couch have fight arguing gesturing furious angry mother yell dispute with preschooler girl annoy. D parent lecture small child imitating play pretend similar. JPG. The strange thing about power is that people only notice it when it disappears. Once my father lost the house, the money, the status, and the vacuum pulled everyone else into motion. Relatives who had been silent for months suddenly found their voices. Not to apologize. Not to reflect. To attack. It started quietly. Messages to my mother. You went too far. Calls to my sister. Think of the children. Whispers about me. Has unstable. Army messed him up. I didn't care. Until one of them crossed a line. My sister called me in the middle of a workday. She didn't say hello. She said my aunt had shown up at her house and started screaming. Not at her. At the kids. My niece cried. My nephew froze. My sister works from home. My mother lives with her now. That day, my mother happened to be out. My aunt took that as an invitation. She shouted about money, about betrayal, about what we did to her brother. She called my sister a whore. She told the kids their grandfather was suffering because of us. My sister didn't argue. She called security. They removed my aunt. Calmly. Professionally. Then my sister called me. I wasn't angry because of the insults. I grew up on insults. I wasn't angry because of threats. I've heard worse. I was angry because she yelled at children. That's when something inside me went very still. I didn't rush. I didn't confront her. I didn't threaten anyone. I started digging. My mother's gossip network did the rest. My aunt was drowning in debt. Loans. borrowed money, promises. She had been telling creditors she was broke, struggling, barely surviving. At the same time, she was telling everyone else she was comfortable, smiling, shopping, living. And she had one plan: wait for my father to sell the house, then get access to whatever money he had left. The house wasn't sold. The money was gone. So she came for my sister instead. That was her mistake. I had never used social media seriously. No Instagram, no Facebook, no online presence. Not because I was principled, because I never needed it. I made an exception. I created a Facebook account. Real name, real photo, nothing fake. Sent my aunt a friend request. She accepted it without hesitation. Older people often think the internet is a mirror, not a record. Her page was full of photos, expensive meals, new clothes, selfies with captions about enjoying life, smiles that didn't match her phone calls to creditors. I saved everything. Then I asked my mother for one thing: a list. Everyone my aunt owed money to. She looked at me for a long time before giving it to me. She knew. I sent the photos. No commentary. No insults. Just facts. This is how she lives. I didn't threaten. I didn't ask for anything. I let reality do the work. The chain reaction was faster than I expected. People started showing up at her door. Not police. Not lawyers. Other people. Angry ones. Paint on the walls. Fish sauce poured into locks. Messages left that didn't use words. I'm not proud of that part, but I'm not responsible for it either. All I did was remove the lie. Within weeks, my aunt sold her house to cover her debts, moved into a much smaller place, quietly disappeared from everyone's life. I felt one thing only: relief. Not joy, not triumph. Relief that she would never scream at my sister's children again. I thought that was the end. It wasn't, because humiliation spreads differently than punishment. My father still had one place where he believed he mattered: the family. On his side, there's an old tradition, a yearly ancestral gathering. Elders speak. News is announced. The head of each branch sits at the main table. Titles matter. Seating matters. Silence matters. My father had always cared deeply about this ritual. It was the last place where people still treated him like a figure of authority. He tried to hide the date. He underestimated my mother. We arrived 2 days early. That side of the family lived hours away. They hadn't heard the full story, only his version. Mutual separation, unstable son, ungrateful children. We didn't argue. We let my mother talk. She didn't shout. She didn't cry. She explained, slowly. 35 years. The violence, the cheating, the money, the fear, the silence. By the end of the day, no one looked at her with pity. They looked at him with disgust. When my father arrived with my aunt and my grandmother and saw us already there, settled, accepted, welcomed, his face collapsed. Not anger. Loss. No one confronted him. No one insulted him. That was the worst part. They ignored him. Later that evening, one of the senior men, equal in rank to my father, stood up and made a proposal. If my father had disgraced the branch, leadership should pass to the next male heir. Me. I didn't ask for it. I didn't want it. I didn't prepare a speech. But refusing would be meant protecting him. So I accepted. At the ceremonial dinner, seating followed the hierarchy. I was placed at the main table. My father tried to sit there. There were no empty chairs. He was guided to a regular table. Not with elders. Not with leaders. With people who whispered. With widows who didn't hold back their comments. He sat through the meal in silence. That night, something finally broke. Not in me. In him. After that, everything unraveled quietly. His mistress disappeared when the money stopped. His calls went unanswered. His apologies came too late. He tried to reach my mother again. We blocked him. She wavered for a moment. A habit is hard to kill, but she held. The last thing I heard was that his cancer had returned. My sister didn't pay this time. I didn't feel joy. I felt closure. Because this wasn't about cruelty. It was about consequence. I didn't destroy him. I stopped protecting him from himself. And once that happened, the system he trusted, a family, money, status, I did the rest. That was Act 3. where the punishment stopped being legal and became social, permanent, and irreversible. After that, nothing exploded. That's the part people usually don't expect. No final confrontation. No screaming match. No dramatic confession where everyone cries and hugs. Just silence. Long, suffocating silence. The kind that settles in once there's nothing left to fight over. My father tried every remaining door. First, pride. He told people he didn't care. That he was free now. That we were dead to him anyway. The town didn't buy it. Pride only works when someone is watching. Then guilt. Messages to my mother through third parties. Tell her I'm sick. Tell her I regret things. Tell her she's still my wife. My mother listened. She always listened. 35 years of training doesn't disappear overnight. For a moment, I thought she might go back. That scared me more than anything had ever done. Not because I needed revenge to continue, but because if she went back, everything we did would collapse into meaninglessness. All that pain would turn into a loop instead of an ending. So we blocked him. Not with anger. Not with speeches. Just silence. That silence did what fists never could. He tried logic next. Offered to talk calmly. To divide things fairly. To start over. There was nothing left to divide. There was nothing left to start. The house was no longer his. The money was gone. The status was gone. The relatives were gone. All that remained was time. And time is cruel to people who live off fear. The old house changed without him noticing at first. Rooms emptied. Furniture gone. No television noise. No visitors. No arguments to win. The walls stopped answering him. Neighbors stopped greeting him. Not out of hatred, out of discomfort. People don't like being reminded that power can evaporate. It makes them nervous. He started shrinking. Physically, too. I saw him once from a distance. Thinner. Slower. Walking like someone who isn't sure where he's allowed to exist anymore. He didn't see me. That was intentional. The illness came back quietly. No announcements this time. No family meetings. No dramatic "we must help him" discussions. My sister didn't hesitate. She said no. Not angrily. Not tearfully. Just no. And that was the real end of his authority. The moment when the daughter who once paid everything decided she wouldn't pay anymore. When obligation finally ran out. He tried to reach my mother again after that. More carefully this time. Less demanding. Softer words. He promised had changed. Abusers always promise change when the audience leaves. My mother almost answered. She held the phone in her hands for a long time. Then she put it down. That was the bravest thing she ever did. From then on, his life narrowed to routines. Short walks. Cheap groceries. Medical visits he now had to budget for. A pension that barely covered the basics. No one to intimidate. No one to impress. The mistress never came back. Love doesn't survive bankruptcy. The relatives stopped calling once they realized there was nothing left to gain. Family loyalty dries up fast when inheritance disappears. Even the gossip faded. There's nothing interesting about a man who has nothing left to lose except his dignity, especially when that dignity ran out years ago. I didn't celebrate. I didn't feel victorious. What I felt was something heavier and quieter. Distance. The kind that finally lets you breathe. I focused on my life. Work. Therapy. Building something that didn't depend on anyone's fear or approval. I learned how much energy anger consumes when it no longer has a target. Sometimes my mother would mention him. Small updates. Neutral facts. I listened without reacting. That was new for both of us. My grandmother was the only one I kept contact with from that side of the family. She was old, sharp-minded, kind to me when I was a child. She loved her son too much to see him clearly, but she never defended what he did. I visited her once a year. Lunar New Year. That was it. She lived quietly on the land that would one day be mine. She asked me to promise one thing. When she was gone, to build an altar for her and my grandfather. I promised. She never mentioned my father. I never asked where his place would be. Some questions don't need answers right away. What people don't understand about stories like this is that revenge isn't the moment when someone suffers. It's the moment when they stop mattering. By the time his calls stopped completely, I realized something uncomfortable. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even cold. I was done. And that's when I knew the damage he caused wouldn't define the rest of my life. Only the part of it he was allowed to touch. That was Act 4, where the punishment became time itself, and time, unlike people, never gets tired. Image https://plus.unsplash.com/premium photo-17 for 48761993 for to-33 FOC for C3D75B. If M equals JPG and XID equals N3WXMJA3FDB8MHXWAG90 by 1YZWXHDGVKFDI for FHX8ZW58MHX8FHX8 and XLib equals RBF for .1.0 and Q equals 60 and W equals 3000. Image https://shop.therapynotebooks.com/cd and/shop/artic. Less artboard to 190 to 1000x.jpg. V equals 167 to 767956. Image https://guim.co.uk/img/media/E091B883 to DAFADD73087 for B89 to D91370D5035FD/to98 for 51 to 6363 to 9 for /master/to636.jpg. Auto equals format and fit equals max, and quality equals 85, and S equals E to C76 for 2A59B for 114 for 111 D67790 for D23 ed25, and width equals 700. Age https://www.shantyt.co/images/blog images, 170,548 of Mother's Day in sta.jpg. Image https://www.youngminds.org.uk/media/npywhh/parent hugging their child.png. Anchor equals center, and height equals 1080, and mode equals crop, and quality equals 55, and RND equals 13,357,741,938,180,000. 0 and width equals 1920. What surprised me most wasn't how far everything went. It was how normal life became afterward. People think revenge keeps burning. That once you cross a line, you live on that side forever. That it stains you. That it follows you into every room. It doesn't. What follows you is the work you didn't do before. When the noise finally stopped, I was left alone with myself, not with him, not with the past, not with court papers or phone records. Just me. And that was harder than any confrontation. For years, my anger had a direction, a target, a shape. I could justify it, weaponize it, explain it. Without him in my head, the anger didn't disappear, it turned inward, asking questions I didn't want to answer. Who am I when I'm not reacting? What do I build when there's nothing left to destroy? I went back to therapy seriously. Not the check-in once a month version. Real work. The kind where you sit in silence and realize how much of your personality was built around surviving someone else. I learned something uncomfortable there. I hadn't just escaped my father. I had learned him. The way I shut down. The way I controlled conversations. The way I prepared 5 steps ahead, expecting betrayal. That scared me. So I started unlearning. Slowly, quietly, without announcing it to anyone. I built routines that had nothing to do with proving anything. Morning walks. Work done cleanly, without overperformance. Relationships where I didn't need leverage to feel safe. My mother changed too. Living with my sister softened her. Not magically, just realistically. She laughed more, spoke more. Sometimes she'd catch herself apologizing for nothing and stop mid-sentence, like she'd realized something new about herself. Once, she asked me if I thought she was weak. I told her the truth. I told her surviving 35 years of fear and still choosing kindness wasn't weakness. It was endurance. But endurance isn't the same as healing. She's still learning the difference. My sister gave birth to a healthy baby boy. When I held him for the first time, something rewired itself in my head. Not love, but responsibility. The clean kind. The kind that doesn't demand repayment. I promised myself one thing in that moment. Whatever I pass down will end with me. No fear as discipline. No silence as control. No obligation disguised as love. The family gathering stopped meaning what they used to mean. Titles faded. Seating arrangements became irrelevant. The old hierarchy lost its power once everyone saw how easily it could be reassigned. Authority only works when people believe it's permanent. It never is. I heard about my father less and less. The updates became infrequent, almost boring. He's still sick. He doesn't go out much. He asked about you. I told my mother she didn't need to relay messages. That boundary held. And then, one day, there was no update at all. Time did what it always does. It reduced him to a detail. I visited my grandmother that year as usual. She was slower, thinner, still sharp. She asked me if I was happy. I didn't lie. I said I was learning how to be. She smiled and said that was enough. When she passed, we built the altar she asked for. Quietly, properly, with respect. I stood there longer than I expected, thinking about lineage, not blood, but behavior. What gets repeated? What stops? I realized something then. Revenge is the opposite of forgiveness. Indifference is. Forgiveness still centers the person who hurt you. Indifference removes them from the equation entirely. I didn't forgive my father. I outgrew him. And that's something no apology could have given me. That was Act 5, where the story stopped being about him and finally became about what comes next. People like to ask one last question after stories like this. Do you regret it? They expect hesitation, a moral lesson, a pause where I soften the edges. I don't. What I regret is waiting as long as I did. I regret the years I spent thinking survival was the same thing as living. I regret believing that blood automatically meant loyalty. I regret how much of my childhood I wasted trying to predict another man's moods instead of learning my own. But the actions? No, because nothing I did created the damage. It only revealed it. My father didn't fall because I pushed him. He fell because, for the first time in his life, no one caught him. That distinction matters. People love to say, you became just like him. They say it because it makes them feel safer. If consequences turn you into a monster, then they never have to support consequences. But here's the truth they don't like. Cruelty is when you harm someone to feel powerful. Justice is when you stop protecting someone from the results of their behavior. I didn't enjoy his suffering. I didn't watch it closely. I didn't need updates. The moment my life stopped orbiting around him, the story was already over. Everything after that was just gravity. I built a life where no one needs to be afraid of me to stay. Where respect isn't enforced by volume. Where silence means peace, not tension. Sometimes I catch myself getting angry, sharp, fast, familiar. And when that happens, I stop. Because anger is a tool. And tools are only dangerous when you pretend they're instincts. I learned to put it down. If there's a lesson here, not for him, but for anyone listening, it's this. You are not required to be loyal to people who hurt you. You are not obligated to carry someone else's shame quietly. And you are not cruel for choosing distance over decay. Some families are meant to be broken. Not out of hate, but out of mercy for the people who come next. I don't know where my father is now. I don't check. I don't ask. That's not bitterness. That's freedom. And if one day he's remembered at all, it won't be as a tyrant or a victim. He'll be remembered as a man who confused fear for respect and learned too late that they are not the same thing. That's the end. Not because the story ran out of pain, but because it finally ran out of him.